Today would have been my sister's birthday. Instead of celebrating, I went to visit her grave. This episode took me a while to work on. It's no longer her birthday. I was up all night the night before trying to get this done on time, and now it's probably going to end up being a few days later than even that. It was hard to think of ways to approach this episode. I guess we'll start by saying I'm not a psychologist. I'm a patient. I am soon to be 36 years old, and I've been a patient uh, since I was 4 or 5. And I'll have to make that a separate episode, or this episode would be way too long. And also, again, it's not literally anyone else's business. I just wanted to share it. I'm speaking of literal. I'm literally certified and deemed unfit to work by the state, and it's a scary time for me being. For now, I'll just say for sure have autism, and that struggle for mental health kind of took all the attention away from my sister and caused lots of extra other problems. And I certainly blame myself, though I shouldn't. Mental health is complicated. And so today's episode is about making sure that everyone's safe and alive and healthy, that other people don't have to go through what we went through. Ideally, we can all be better people who make healthier decisions. And despite having 30 years of immersive experience, I am still pretty far from the end of my psychological journey. Some ways I feel like I've only barely started. So I want to help people. I'll spare you some I'll spare you some gory details today, and I'll spare you 30 years of trial and error. Just sort of give you a menu of choices that you might be able to use for your own personal health and well-being. Ultimately, no one gets through life successfully by themselves. Everyone has help and support from family and from friends, and everyone, therapists especially. I'm personally against medication. I'm not a big fan of talk therapy. Uh, I am a big fan of self care and self reliance. But this, not to say, I as much as enthusiastic as I am about that, I'm going to be the first to tell you that no one handles their own mental health alone. Everyone's personal mental health is their personal responsibility. However, community mental health is a community responsibility, and no one is. We're all broken if we do it alone. We're all we're all individually broken, and society is broken as a result if we do it alone. I think that we probably figured this out real early. The roots of psychology go back as far as the roots of religion. Religion, in its essence, is a code of ethics, a way to think, a way to live your life, a way for a community to organize. While religion isn't necessarily my own personal cup of tea, I do see how it would have some very strong psychological benefits for everyone. And on a scientific note, it benefits you whether you believe in it or not. You gain health just from going. And I think that's kind of cool. And whether you go to a church or synagogue or a mosque or a temple of any sort uh, or not, there's still there's still a spiritual aspect to psychology that must be acknowledged. The most important thing is to focus on having a sense of purpose in your life, a sense of place in the community, and the experience of things that are greater than oneself. If you really want to get the psychological benefits of religion, you can't just go. You'll get something out of it if you go, but it's not the real benefit. The benefit comes from the community projects, from singing the songs, from being an active part of it, actually reading the book, whichever book is part of your religion, reading it, thinking about it, what it means for you. Uh, if you don't do those parts, then it's like, yeah, people will see you going and they'll give you stuff. But is that really how you want to live? Is that really honest or truthful? You want to get some real benefits from the experience. It's worth it. A big reason that it's worth it has to do with how the human brain works. Whether whether you believe in it or not, uh, there's some part of this that has to do with evolution. That we developed we developed our brains developed in such a way as to we need each other's company. It has to do with mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are pretty cool. Uh, when you're in church, if you're having a bad day and the person next to you is smiling, you see them smiling, and then your body might smile whether you feel like smiling or not. And because you're smiling, the act of smiling can release endorphins and serotonin and dopamine into your system. And next thing you know, the smile is genuine. This actually also works if you smile at yourself in a mirror. Uh, it's not as enjoyable. It's good to be of service, regardless of how you choose to do it. Uh, it's good to be whether it's being part of a team, basketball, football, baseball. Like if you're just a team sports, it's a big part of what makes soldiers so passionate about what they do is when you're on Team USA or you're on the Team Army versus Team Navy. There's a camaraderie. This is true of all humans in all walks of life. And it's an important psychological benefit to be a part of a group. And it's part of it. You don't, like I'm saying, you don't get through this entirely by oneself. It takes a village, and how one chooses to participate in the village is up to the individual, and I think that's righteous. Religions in general are a phase of human development where we're asking why. We don't necessarily have the scientific method all figured out, and we're still dealing with violence and sorrow, tragedy and conflict. We're just trying to trying to be better than we were the day before, and some days we don't succeed in that goal. As far back as Buddhism, trying to see the end of suffering and why humans are the way we are, why we do what we do, uh, and how to stop it. How to stop being like that. Uh, there's societal rules going back to Adam and Eve. Don't touch, don't reach to the tree of knowledge. Just enjoy the tree of life. And in its essence, that's what mental health is the ability to just enjoy life. And whether you know how it works or why it works or not, there's a sort of discipline involved, uh, not just with religion, other aspects of society. Discipline is present. This is an essential part. Self discipline is an essential part of mental health. It's the daily rituals, the daily habits. We are creatures of habit. So it's those daily practices that make us whole and functional, and especially if those daily practices for me, it's a lot of reading, some exercise. Other people, it might be more exercise and less reading. In both cases, you're building. You're every time you do it, you're getting a little more than the day. You're a little more than the day before. As a person, you've just grown. You used to be smaller, and now you're bigger. That's why it's important. Physical health is important. We'll get to that. It Every part of us is connected, and that's one of the things that Buddhism recognized. As far as the importance of daily habits, I think that Islam gets it best. It's really hard to fathom a culture that kneels before God 5 times a day being violent. It's really hard to imagine. It's praying 5 times a day. You're kneeling and you're praying. That's such devotion and self discipline. I I'm sorry. I just really admire it. It's quite admirable. Uh, anyone who has that dedication to prayer should be okay, and it's sad that we're not as a group. We're not. There's there's a lot to it. I think Buddhism gets some of that right when it comes to the materialistic thing. Jesus also talks about that, not being so focused on material goods and being more focused on, well, just helping, being part of the community. And in fairness to in fairness to Adam Smith, uh, if you're really passionate about the community, you get something for that. Um, it might, if in a financial world such as we live in currently, uh, that could mean monetary gains. It could mean attention and adulation. It could mean some sort of you just get stuff. You help people and you get stuff. I don't think that's the right reason to do it, but if you need any reason to get started, uh, you'll find that if you really put your whole body and soul and mind into the experience, that the benefits are spiritual and material. And it's worth it for some people to at least try it, regardless of the motivation. Well, anyways, the point is that we're creatures of habit. Old habits die hard, and uh, if you lean into them, there's some deep truths that still resonate today, and they're valid. If that's if that works for you, uh, I suggest that you really lean into it because it's working for you, and God bless you. God bless you for trying. We're all creatures of habit. I think of uh, the myth of Sisyphus. Myths in general are an important part of cultural, psychological well being. They're the lessons that we tell ourselves to guide us through difficult times. And this is again, whether it's religion or not, and whether you understand them or not, they'll help you. There'll be a moment at some point later on when you'll be like, oh, so that's what he meant. Stars above. And it'll all just come crashing down. We're all creatures of habit, adaptation. Uh, what you do on a daily basis, that's your food. Metaphorically, we are what we eat. So, anyways, you don't have to believe in any specific religion. There's a whole lot of health benefits to just walking around in nature, exploring nature, uh, visiting nature, literally touching grass, breathing fresh air. These are all really, it's really important to do that as often as possible. This includes gardening. There's a lot of psychological benefits to gardening. For each of these things, meditation is important. I feel disorganized. Eckhart Tolle, for example, definitely talks about the value of silence and finding peace of mind. So, uh, that sort of thing. There's a lot to be gained from the exercise aspect of it. There's always a risk or a downside to everything that we're talking about. I found the downsides, for example, I found the downsides of medication to be completely unbearable, uh, to the point where I won't take them. But it's true, as a community, You got to be careful of which leaders you choose. You got to be careful of who you. Religion is about faith, and faith is really uh, it's different from trust, but it's trust. In all of this, there's an aspect of trust. You're gonna have to trust yourself. Trust yourself to start and maintain daily habits. You're gonna have to trust your therapist or family members or friends or people in church. Uh, if you're out in nature, you're gonna have to trust the bears or just have faith that the air you're breathing is safe. We'll get to trust. When that trust is broken, it affects us. It affects us a lot. There are deep consequences to having our trust broken. It is important to have a sense of personal integrity, which is part of what comes out of that self discipline of maintaining those daily habits. That sense of purpose and working towards it every day is part of that integrity. Those codes of ethics, wherever you get them from, are part of that integrity. It makes trustworthiness more attainable. An author that I want to talk about right now is Dr. Henry Cloud. He tends to quote from the Bible a lot, but he kind of blends both the Bible and neuroscience together in his conversations to in an effort to be more relatable. And so he wrote a book called The Anatomy of Trust, or it was just called Trust, but this article here is called The Anatomy of Trust. Uh, it's on his website, drcloud.com. Trust is built through understanding. Someone is going to trust you when they think and feel like you understand them and their needs instead of just persuading them. A key sales error is as a first step. Seek first to understand, right? And that's in the Bible. Seek first to understand. It's also part of Stranger in Strange Land. This is the whole process of grokking is to seek first to understand and to really understand. And so the second part here is to understand yourself and your intentions and understand them and their intentions. It's a big part of building trust. Trust is built through abilities. Can you do the thing that someone is trusting you to do? You know, part of that, and that's on here too, is track record. If you see that they have a track record, it makes it easier to assume that they can do the thing that you want them to do. In the case of someone who's new, sometimes you're new to something, but you just have a good feeling, or it could be the Dunning Kruger effect. You got to be careful about that. You don't want to be overconfident, but it could also be something like maybe you studied really hard and you just haven't tried like physically done the actions yet. So you'll have some, your motor neurons haven't connected to the activity yet. Um, that's a big part of learning is activating motor neurons, not even thinking or feeling, but just doing neurons. And those with running, with playing any kind of sport, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Any kind of skill, woodworking, auto mechanics. You can read all you want, watch all the YouTube videos you want, but until you turn that wrench, it's a whole different story. Uh, but ability. If you're strong enough for the task, and most people can, they can turn a wrench. If they having trouble turning the wrench, and you're standing there trusting them, then maybe you can give them a, here's how you turn the wrench real quick. Um, but we all have our learning curves. The point here is, you could trust that they have the ability without having the track record. The track record really really helps. Um, but there's also other ways to test whether they might have the capacity for something. So that's a big part of it. It's built through character. Uh, Character is built up through a track record as well, and it's really just that integrity. And like I said previously, if you're too busy focused on meditation, you're too busy focused on exercise, you're too busy focused on community service, you don't really have time for violence. You're too busy focused on God to focus on violence. Too busy gardening. Too busy practicing your musical instrument or learning a new skill. Any new skill, being an electrician is pretty cool. So, yeah, there's a lot. It's important to get. It's important to be healed. One of the best books that I've ever read, period. And certainly one of the best books about psychology that I've ever read. And I've read hundreds. Uh, it's The Body Keeps the Score. It's a very upsetting book. Just trigger warnings all around. But pretty much everything that we're talking about here today, uh, it's coming from personal experiences. It's coming from The Body Keeps the Score. It's coming from CPTSD, that's complex post traumatic stress disorder, From Surviving to Thriving by Dr. Pete Walker. Body Keeps the Score is by Bessel van der Kolk. I put it up on the screen. I forget the author of Neuroscience of Human Relationships. That book really changed the game for me. Because a lot of these other ones, Body Keeps the Score has testimony. Well, I'm using the word testimony. Like I say, there's a faith aspect to all of this. Um, so Bessel van der Kolk uses patients who've consented to be part of the case studies, to have their story shared, because it matters, because these stories matter. And again, I want to share my story with y'all. It'll happen eventually, but not this time. This time, I want to focus on resources. Um, CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving, has some really important. We'll do one at a time. I'm sorry, I have ADHD and autism, so I'm trying to info dump, but I'm distracting myself. uh, there's a book called The Power of Full Engagement, uh, which I appreciated a lot. That's Tony Schwartz. So yeah, I should read that again. there's there's a few good books about focus. I should probably read them again. Where was I? The Body, and it's keeping the score. It's an intense book. I love. He gets into uh, post traumatic stress disorder, And a lot of what he's talking about crosses over with the complex PTSD book. And it also crosses into the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, Dr. Stephen Porges. So I'm still reading that one. I wanted to do this one on time. I'm already a couple days late, so I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying to do this the best I can. Uh, it's complicated because editing takes forever. I didn't know what the fuck to say. Uh, Having some sort of well, I I keep self critic attacks are a big part of the CPTSD Surviving to Thriving book. There's a lot of there's a lot of good therapy suggestions in the Body Keeps score. A lot of what I'm talking about here will be referencing that. Um, it's a good one to think about is internal family systems. It's where you have a sort of internal mother, internal father, um, sort of a metaphorical, symbolic way of coping with surroundings. One important aspect of understanding other people is theory of mind. What do they want? How are they feeling? What's going on in their lives? Um, and by they, I mean anyone who's not you. Uh, when you look outwards at your family and your friends or your loved ones, and you want to communicate with them on a deeper level, you have to be thinking about what they might be thinking about. I have I have two separate problems. I'm sometimes so far up my own ass that I'm just eating my own shit, and then I'm full of my own shit, and then I'm spewing that shit on everyone else, and that's unpleasant. Uh, in my happier moments, I'm imagining people's lives, but it's my imagination. I haven't asked them anything. I'm too shy and awkward to ask them anything. And so then my imagination runs wild. And when I say wild, I mean insane. I mean crazy. I mean, I don't know. Uh, Sometimes I'll just invent whole scenarios, and they're cool scenarios, but that's not what happened in people's lives. Uh, people get offended when you just make assumptions about their lives without asking any questions. One thing I really loved about the neuroscience of human relationships was how they talk about uh, they go over evolutionary psychology, they go over neuroscience. Uh, it's very comprehensive. I listen to it as an audiobook, and it's like a 20 something. It's a long ass book. It's I like juicy books like that. Um, and I especially appreciated the systematic approach to information. Um, but yeah, so they go over all the parts of the brain. Most of uh, most of what's covered in there. It's amazing how many diagnoses can boil down to the same handfuls of systems. The basal forebrain, get that right? Yeah, so it's a whole section. It's like the Broca's area to the language center. It has to do with the amygdala. It's kind of the most important. So like everything goes through the amygdala one way or another. It goes through the anterior cingulate cortex, uh, the insula. I don't remember all of it off the top of my head. I have my notes here, but if I click away, I'm going to get distracted again. The point is that the same parts of the brain get damaged during traumatic events, and a lot of religions and a lot of therapeutic methods overlap altogether. Altogether, the philosophies, the philosophies, the philosophical aspects of this, the psychological aspects of this, the spiritual aspects of this, the physiological. It's all kind of one. It's all echoes of one system. Uh, Now I'm too far ahead of and behind myself and beyond myself. That's not the scope. That's not the point of this. That's not the point of this here, and that's not what we're going to talk about right now. But everything is connected, as we've discussed in previous episodes. So we'll move on from there. Um, that's your brain. Your brain is processing stimuli. That stimuli is partly inside the brain itself when you get all caught up in crazy thoughts like I do, or having an emotional flashback. In chapter 8 of CPTSD, I love, like, this is how he starts the book. Uh, a lot of people are maybe familiar with the message on a therapist, or whenever you're dealing with medical professionals who are not emergency medical professionals, you'll get the voice message. If you're in crisis, if this is an emergency, dial 911, or call your, I forget the rest of it off the top of my head. I used to have it memorized, and I kind of have a point of pride that I've forgotten part of it at least. Um, so I'm reading the introduction to CPTSD, Surviving to Thriving, and he's going through that at the beginning. He's saying the first half of it, and I'm like, call your medical professionals. Call 911 or an ambulance, or go to the emergency room. Blah blah blah. He's like, go to chapter 8. I'm like, oh shit. This is new. So I think that alone, I think the confidence of that statement is what draws uh, what appeals to me about Dr. Pete Walker's book more than everything else about it. Uh, and let me tell you, chapter 8 is a doozy. So we have the brain. We have different layers of the brain that developed at different stages of human history. We have the hormones and how the hormones react in the brain. Those are with neuroreceptors uh, and neurotransmitters. We have the nervous system. That's just the whole body all throughout, from your brain to your toes. You've heard of neuropathy. It's in your toes. Like, not exclusively in your toes, but you get the idea. I have some of that sometimes. That's why I need to exercise more. My type is preventable, and I'm kind of too young for it. So that's my attitude. Um, but yeah, so you have the vagal system is basically all those nerves. It's the communication between the heart and the brain, the lungs and the brain, the communication, when you feel hot and cold, all of those systems connect to the brain, connect to the spine. It's all one big system altogether. Uh, if you will, it's more like you are, and therefore you think. Uh, and you would be whether you think or not, which is tragic. It's a tragic circumstance. There's a lot of debates about consciousness, but the science of it is pretty cool. I'm not really going to cover that in this video. I just encourage everyone to think about what consciousness means while we're thinking of theory of mind and the brain, how it functions. So the vagal theory can get out of whack, and can respond to things in faulty manners that are upsetting. They're disturbing and scary. It's not a fun world to be in when uh, when the psyche is so fragile. Uh, anything can happen to it. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, it's like I said before. I'm still working through the polyvagal theory. It's a big chunky book. I've been taking lots and lots of notes of it. This is the week to talk about mental health, if ever there was one. Uh, so this is what we're doing. uh, it's the next morning. It's been carrying on for days and days, and I'm not playing little games. So this takes a lot out of me, and yeah, so I'm still working on it. So the polyvagal system, all those nerves send information back to the brain. The brain responds in a variety of ways, and uh, some of that is hormone based. If you can control aspects of your happiness and uh, have a more balanced hormonal system through habits you can build up. The to-do list habit that I've been forming has a lot to do with dopamine. I get a little dopamine boost every time I check something off my list. Putting the film thing on my list definitely has given me a boost. Doing these videos has been a huge psychological boost for me. Even if even if I'm not really getting much listeners, I'm not getting a whole lot of interaction with other people yet. I'm still getting a huge psychological benefit from it's kind of a burden to just know these things and to have an interest and never be able to share it with anyone, or rarely be able to share it with people. And I feel like this is information that's maybe not as well known as it needs to be. And I have an obligation to share what I know with other people who can then go and read these books for themselves. They can read these articles that I'm posting everywhere for themselves. And I really encourage you to have as much intellectual curiosity as possible. and ask as many questions as possible. Question me, question what I'm saying, read these things for yourself. Uh, I'm especially grateful that uh, neuroscience of human relationships really opened my mind. Uh, it put it put these other things into context, uh, in a deeper context. So let's get into the actual solutions. You get the science of it. We've talked about the religion as a shortcut. So um, there's different kinds of therapies. There's a lot of different kinds of therapy. There's talk therapy, basic psychoanalytics, which would be more like Freud and Jung, and interpreting dreams and kind of the basic thing. In these books, they talk about how I believe it's CPTSD, Surviving to Thriving, where they said, where he says it's not always helpful to do talk therapy. Oh, and in When Anger Hurts, in both of those books, for an angry person, that habit of being angry releases adrenaline and fight or flight endorphins, and just makes you angrier. Uh, that's where I was going with the polyvagal thing. I got lost for a second there. But that's, yeah, so we're back on track now. So the polyvagal system is heavily involved in your fight or flight response. And whether or not it's stable matters. It's gonna have a huge, whether you're feeling fear and anxiety and anger and stress and depression are all based on how the polyvagal system is talking to your brain and how the brain responds by releasing hormones. This is something that you can manage with medication. If you don't, it's again, there's an easier way to do things and a hard way to do things, and the hard way gets you better benefits. And even if you take the easy way, you should still do these hard way things. If anything, stuff like medication or religion is a great foundation. If you need the external help, then those are excellent ways to get yourself prepared for doing the hard work. I still encourage everyone to take personal responsibility for their mental health. If you put it in other people's hands, they may not have the best of intentions, and you may not know it until it's too late, and then your complex your complex PTSD is even more complicated, and you don't want that. And I'm telling you this from personal experience, and we'll get to that in another video. Well, for now, just understand that there are financial incentives in the system to keep you sick, keep you sad. And taking personal responsibility for yourself is going to make all the difference in your mental health. So, hormones. Speaking of religion, singing. It's always been my favorite part. By far, my favorite part of going to any religious service. That's both, for me, that's both synagogue and church. Um, I've been to a few other rituals, but only kind of once, so I don't want to speak too much on those. But man, I love the blues. I love gospel music. It's only natural that I would get into church music. Um, I like when it's informal because I'm not the best singer. So um, it's nice to be able to sing as part of a group and no one's judging you. You're just getting your extra oxygen intake, and we're about to get to breath in a minute here. But I really music is so important to me. Uh, Music therapy has all kinds of benefits. It's an essential part. Listening to my favorite songs on repeat, and for me, that'll change by the day. And I'm as an addict, I get a huge high from discovering a new song to love. I get a huge like. I wish it happened more often, and I do. I'll look all down. I'll go on Pandora and save like dozens of albums at a time, and then just run through an album after album after album. There's this one song by Jeffrey Oriema called "Spirit of My Father." Gets me high as fuck. Like just listening to that and dancing around. It's huge endorphin, serotonin, dopamine boost. Just massive. I can headbang to "Spirit of My Father" all day. I love uh, another one that's got me recently is Lee Field's "Extraordinary Man." That's more of a just strictly dopamine. Dopamine is more about anticipation. Have you ever had an experience where you anticipated and then were disappointed? It's because you had a dopamine boost during anticipation, but no dopamine, serotonin, endorphin, yada yada combo. You know, it's usually a cortisol drop and a serotonin boost will do the trick. Um, it has to be combined with that anticipation of dopamine. That's why the to-do list works so well. Serotonin and endorphins from music, uh, dancing around can give you an adrenaline boost. If you're dancing around a lot, then you're really working. It starts to become exercise, and again, exercise is just so important. No, every single book, every fucking one says workout. Most of them say yoga, specifically some kind of stretching or yoga or doing walks. Exercise is really important. For there's a book, The ADHD Advantage, and in the ADHD Advantage, they have a couple different things. Uh, One of them is how if you're having trouble focusing, doing like a 15-20 minute workout might be exactly what you need as an ADHD person to get yourself back on track. Uh, Breath is really important. It's kind of the key to all of it, and you'll see in meditation and in yoga, breath is really emphasized. Breathe in here, breathe out there. Same with regular workouts. When you're lifting, inhale while you lift, exhale while you release. So you're preparing for the next one. Or inhale while you're doing the rep, and then exhale while you're holding, in between reps. It kind of depends on what you're doing. There's different breathing techniques for different um, exercises, and that's its own video for that exercise part. But for breathing, there's box breathing. Uh, it's used in the Navy SEALs. Or I keep seeing that red. I'm not a Navy SEAL, so I can't say that I've been there and done that. But in the book, there's a book about Navy SEAL training that I read, and in various articles they're cited. I feel like the Navy SEALs would probably sue or at least put out a cease and desist order if they didn't want people claiming that, but maybe they just don't care. Maybe it's good advertising. um, anyway, so box breathing. One common way of starting out would be to breathe in for a count of four, hold for a count of four, breathe out for a count of four, hold for a count of 4 on the exhale. So then there's no air in your lungs. My first encounter with this actually was in a tantra book. So that's fun. I think that I think it's a helpful one. It's one that I tried to do. I was most involved with box breathing as a teenager, and then I kind of lapsed and haven't gotten back to it. Um, but as a teenager, I got up to 10. I was so proud of myself, and I would do that until I fell asleep. Not passed out, but like I would do that and be so calm afterwards that I could finally sleep. But the ruminating thoughts, perseverating. It's a word I learned while in jail. It's become one of my favorite words because it's exactly, yeah. It it means it's the same as ruminating thoughts. It's basically when you're spinning your wheels in the mud, but with thinking. For breathing techniques, you can check out "Breathe" by James Nestor. You can also check out Andrew Weil. Andrew Weil is also a mycologist. He's got a lot of excellent information in a few different areas. Uh, not just breathing. Uh, there's a breathing technique called coherent breathing, which I learned about while making this video from James Nestor. Uh, it goes in for 6 and out for 6 with no holding at the top or bottom. You just in and out. Trying to It's just trying to get yourself back to basics. Uh, whereas box breathing is good for focus. Coherent breathing is good for uh, fundamentals. It's good for stasis. And then if you need to calm down, this is from Weil, and then James Nestor did something silly about it. He added 1 second to one thing and then called it his own thing, and it's silly butts. But anyways, so the technique is from Andrew Weil, and I first heard about it in Body Keeps Score, uh, where your polyphagal. That's again. See how all these books are connected. Okay, so if you're in a fight or flight response and you want to calm the fuck down, the best way to do it is to breathe in for 4, hold for 8. You can also hold for 7. 7 is Weil, 8 is Nestor. He was having trouble counting, so he added one more to make it easier to count. Um, then you exhale for 8. You really want to get all the air out of your system. One interesting form of therapy that I had read about, it's called holotropic breathwork by Stanislav and Christina Grof. It's a pretty important book for if you want to understand this method of therapy. It's I haven't tried it myself yet. It sounds like fun. The You would think it's calming sort of music. Apparently, they'll do like rock and roll. They go hard with it, so I'm excited to try it one time at least, just to see what it's like, and if I like it, maybe I'd stick with it. Um, but yeah, so holotropic breath work. There's a person who guides you, and you can have past life regressions supposedly, but more grounded in here and now. Like if you were traumatized from birth, it's remember the emotional flashback, right? So you can have closure for emotional flashbacks that you couldn't possibly remember, end quote, because it's still right. The body kept the score. it's in your vagus nerve as a thing, and it's one of your earliest patterns, so it's had a lot of time to be neuroplastic. And so yeah, holotropic breath work. It's a form of breathing and meditation where you're guided with the therapist, and they're gonna get some of that those really horrifying memories out of your system, or help you work through trauma in a focused way. Not all of the science that it's founded upon has held up over the years, but it seems like what they've done is more grounded in reality than what was his name? See, because I'm thinking of the Orgons from Naked Lunch. It's the Orgons guy. So they're not really associated with that, but they're from that same era. So there's an influence of sorts. Anyways, I think it's interesting. Um, and it's worth checking out if you're curious about new types of therapy besides regular talk therapy or besides medication. Um, and if regular meditation isn't so fun for you, if you need to panic, if you want to get yourself pumped up, you can hyperventilate on purpose. You go, then scare the shit out of yourself. Uh, Scare the shit out of your nervous system, your polyvagal system, and then release adrenaline for kind of no reason. I mean, you could have a reason if you're doing some kind of competition or something. Uh, Certain kinds of singing and rapping, like especially if you're practicing Tech Nine songs, can get you pumped up in that kind of way. Uh, Death metal. I'm a big fan of both. Um, Music. Yeah, so not just listening to music, playing music, uh, learning how to play music, develop as the act of learning a new thing has to do with neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is good for long-term health, long-term memory. It's good for first of all, it's just fun. It's fun. Why not? You learned a new instrument, now you're a rock star. Even if you never get to actually play on stage, you're a rock star in your own mind. You get anytime you have that sense of accomplishment, you're getting not just a hormonal boost, but you're training your system to have that sense of accomplishment, to enjoy it. And it's a big part of mental health. Theater is also mentioned in The Body Keeps Score. It's another part that's really it seemed important to the author. I like it a lot, and that could be a variety of things. Laughter is good for boosting oxytocin, lowering cortisol, serotonin, dopamine. It's mostly the oxytocin and serotonin, and um, the lowering of cortisol. So if you go to improv, there's a bit of surprise. So there's two types of stress: eustress and distress. Eustress for euphoria, being happy, and distress, which we're all pretty familiar with being distressed. I don't need to tell you that's the kind of stress you're used to thinking about. uh, but no, like witnessing the birth of your child, or getting married, or graduating from college, or any major achievement is going to affect your body in the same kind of way as as if there's a death in your family, if you suffered a major injury, if you got fired from your job. the system kind of reacts just, there's some differences, but you're also training your body to be on heightened alert. So that's partly why a person who's been traumatized can't enjoy happiness. Can't enjoy positive events in their lives. That there's um, until you've brought the system down to base level, to calm, uh, it's really hard. So yeah, there's different types of talk therapy. Uh, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's dialectical behavioral therapy, and at some point they go back to B.F. Skinner, uh, and a lot of research has happened since then, and the profession has evolved quite a bit. I really appreciate how far it's come. I will tell you, in the '90s, that we were nowhere near here, and so it's really it's a relief. It's a relief to see the changes, the positive changes in the mental health system, because even in like 2004, they were absolutely draconian and horrifying. I know this for a fact. So that's why I don't do talk therapy so much. But I like these new ones, cognitive. I appreciate them, cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is uh, talk therapy. Why do you think you did that? Why do you think this happened? Analyzing stuff. But it's more about daily habits. It's very much what I've been talking about with regards to self discipline. Dialectical behavioral therapy, it's fun because it's there's some of it is talk therapy. It doesn't necessarily require talk therapy. Um, there's mindfulness involved, so it comes back around to religion, and it comes back around to the polyvagal theory. Um, and so meditation is really important to the process. And really, all it is closing your eyes and focusing on breathing. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but if you just need a place to start, you're doing an action, and that's the only thing that you're doing. And then it's all meditation. If you're playing music, like if you're just practicing scales, that can be a meditation. You're not thinking about anything else. You're not even thinking about the scales, really. You're looking at your fingers are moving, you're hearing the sound, and you're doing it again. And that's a meditation. You're walking, you're on a hike, you're appreciating nature, you're looking at nature, you're focused on your breathing, you're focused on your form as you're walking, each step that you take, and you're feeling how each step impacts, the placement of your foot, the way it shakes up your leg, feeling it, as you're inhaling, as your lungs expand. You're focused on this whole process, and nothing else, nothing in your head. It can be birds chirping, it could be people walking by. I mean, for me, uh, I do get triggered. I get a bad adrenaline rush if someone is like running or cycling by me. I always think that they're like charging in for an attack, and I'm ready to fight back. So don't cycle too close to me. I might push you. No, I'm trying to work on it. The fantasy has pushed them, but in reality, I'm like focused on that long exhale to calm down my polyvagus system and to just calm the fuck down and not attack random strangers just for living their life and going wee on a bicycle. It's not a crime, right? So then you can meditate, but you have to be careful that it doesn't turn into rumination and a self-critical attack, an internalized, uh, a negative internalized family structure. So that's why I work out at home. I just can't even deal with people anymore. Um, there's a lot of negative effects to isolation. There's absolutely such thing as too much. You know, it's nice to be the it's nice to be the wise old hermit on the mountaintop, but it really can cause some severe. It could be a source of trauma in and of itself, and I also know about that firsthand, which is sad. The saddest part is that I went out there thinking people would follow me to the desert. Um, it was I think people thought I was running away from my problems. It was like, what do you mean? I was doing okay. I was doing okay for a minute there. I felt inspired. I had a newfound sense of purpose from taking horticulture classes and reading about gardening, and I learned so much, and it just blew my mind. So I was like, "Oh my god, I got to be a part of this." And I forgot to tell people about it, why I was excited, and I also had a bad support system, friends who weren't going to join me. Like, no matter how excited I got, they would just be like, yeah, yeah, good for you. And people don't need that kind of negativity in their lives. I really like the parts in both Dune and in Stranger in a Strange Land that talk about the importance of water. It is hugely important. It's massively important. Are you getting enough oxygen? Are you focused enough on the outside world? Are you getting enough water? Are you getting enough water? And enough water, it's half a gallon a day is kind of a bare minimum. For survival purposes, you need a lot less than that. You need about 20 ounces every 24 hours. But you're gonna be having a hard time, and that you don't do anything. You lay quietly in the shade and sleep as much as possible, um, and breathe slowly to conserve water. But ideally, you're drinking something like a gallon a day, and ideally, you're putting that water towards your plant. You're expelling it out towards your plant somewhere somehow, in like a purple piping system. Purple piping in the purple piping system. Yeah. So, sorry. Hi. Water. It's so important. Drink it. Drink it now. Soda and coffee are not substitutes for water. They're going to dehydrate you further, and they're going to, in different ways, cause chemical reactions in your brain that make you less mentally healthy than you could be if you just drank some dang water. Caffeine in general is really really bad for one's mental health, and sleep. It's super important. Uh, as far as mental health resources go, I recommend hypnosis. It doesn't. It's one of those things that it works whether it works or not. It works whether you believe in it or not. If you call it the placebo effect, then it definitely works. And all it needs to be is a placebo effect. So lucky you. Hypnosis is great. Um, Two of my favorites are Steve G. Jones and Michael Seeley. They, I like their style. There's a few other ones, and I frequently get lost in imagining like South Park episodes, making fun of them, stuff like that. I don't know, just random cartoon versions of them because sometimes the stuff they say or the way that they say it is so silly, and it tickles me. And then I also think that they know that, and they're saying like they know that'll release positive, just positive association because you're laughing. So uh, it works in many layers. I found that when I like, I don't believe in all of it. I don't think that you're gonna automatically have past life regressions or it's gonna repair your DNA. Some of that stuff is a little too woo woo for me. Uh, but I do think that hypnosis is effective. And even if it was just a placebo effect, if you have the habit of falling asleep to confidence hypnosis every night, I can tell you from firsthand experience, personally trying it out, you will feel more confident before than you did before. Maybe not by a lot, and it does take like it's got to be a real habit. Um, there's all kinds of positive effects of sleep. It's just a good reset for the system. You can tell if you're having bad dreams that your polyvagus system is out of whack. Sleep apnea is one of my problems, and it definitely causes you're not getting the quality of sleep that you would want when you have apnea. So, taking care of your physical health, whether that's exercising more often, which is what I'm trying to do, or getting a CPAP machine, which is the last case scenario, you kind of need that. You need whatever you got to do to get a good night's sleep. Um, you might have to take sleep therapy, sleep studies. Um, it's just really important. You need 8 hours. That's one of the things Dr. Pete Walker talks about in his in CPTSD Surviving to Thriving is the workaholism, and I'm definitely one of those people. Uh, it runs in the family to deal with stress by getting more stressed out by working harder and doing more all the time. Like I basically slept. I worked until I couldn't stand it anymore, and then I went to sleep. And I got up, and now here I am working some more. But work in and of itself can be a meditation, especially if it's a repetitive task. It can be really helpful. It can be a good process. It's really just too much of a good thing. Same with sleep. You can cause yourself to become depressed or anxious by sleeping more than 8 hours. You'll find that if you're doing catch up sleep like I sometimes do, get like a 12 hour. You sleep 3 hours one night and 10 hours the next night, then you're out of sync, and yeah, you'll feel it. Uh, Sleeping's very important. Food, coming back around to ADHD advantage. I really liked what they were saying about iron. And that was one, I read that book, and it was kind of a chunky book, but I didn't end up taking that many notes on it. So, what I'm telling you here, like, I encourage you to read it for motivation. If you read it from start, ADHD Advantage from start to finish, and you have ADHD, you will feel pumped up by the end of the book. You'll feel like you can handle this. Um, Maybe you'll take more and better notes than I did. I feel like I was pretty focused. I tried my best, but there's always room for improvement. So uh, I think you could get a lot out of it. What I mostly got out of it was the exercise thing and the iron thing and meditation for an ADHD person might involve a lot of movement. There's also a lot. They covered a lot of the stuff in neuroscience of human relationships as well. It didn't. It's a mind expanding book, but it doesn't give you the motivation that ADHD Advantage does. There's a lot of books on mindfulness. Thich Nhat Hanh is a good one. Eckhart Tolle, good author. Those are the more famous ones. I don't have my mindfulness notes up on the screen right now. So um, the point is that meditation can be chopping wood, practicing scales on an instrument, taking photographs, walking around in nature, doing Tai Chi or yoga or really any kind of martial art. If you're doing it properly, if you're really like focused on a kata, then you yeah, that's it's meaningful and it's a meditation. You're getting in a lot of those scenarios, you're getting more out of it than just the meditation. You're also learning a new skill, and that'll boost your confidence in the long run. That's a huge aspect of self-esteem. It's just trying new things, succeeding a little bit, becoming interested in it, trying it a little more, succeeding a little more, improving over time, building a new habit. And there's a whole, the dopamine cycle, the serotonin cycle, anticipation, reward. Um, and it's a way of building an upward spiral so that even if you have downward spiral days, you can get out of it a little easier, a little smoother than before. I found the book, The Four Foundations of Mindfulness in Plain English. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce this author's name. Well, is it more respectful to not try at all, or is it more respectful to try and fail? Uh, Bante Anipola Gunnar Gunnar Antana. Yeah, so all of his books, uh, I think he's from, I don't remember exactly, I think he was South Korea. But yeah, so all of his whole series is mindfulness in plain English, something something. It's you know meditation in plain English, the four foundations of mindfulness in plain English. There's a lot of them, and they're all worth reading. Um, some of it is more spiritual, but I really liked how he walked through actual steps of meditation, and that's where I'm getting the stuff like walking meditation comes directly. Another good art therapy book is called Your Art Will Save Your Life by Beth Pickens. Um, I like Stephen R. Covey for Habits, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And the one that's right here is An Effective Life, which a lot of them, like Effective Life, was basically like a summary of several books and mostly getting back to the Highly Effective People books. So you're in some ways better off just reading Seven Habits of Highly Effective People over An Effective Life. Um, stick with the classics. They're classics for a reason. So, uh, so, at some point I was talking about food, and I want to get back to that real quick. Uh, I really like that part in Aldous Huxley's Island uh, where they're sitting down for a meal and they're describing how they say grace on the island. And they say grace by chewing. They take one bite of food and they chew it for a minute, for 60 seconds in silence. And they focus on what they're chewing. I found that interesting. They focus on the taste, the texture, they think about where it comes from, they think about who they're chewing it with, they think about what is food and not food in their mouth, or like their tongue versus the food, the teeth versus the food. I thought that was very important. It's like a kind of meditation while eating. Omega 3s are essential. They're up there with iron. There's a lot of different foods, vitamin D, just part of walking around in nature or gardening or any outdoor activity is getting that sunshine, which will boost your mood. Even on a cloudy day, you can get sunburn, you can get vitamin D. The sun, the clouds, if you have seasonal affective disorder, the clouds might make you sad. For me, I'm only happy when it rains. Sorry. I really though, I'm very much a Adam's family and Munsters kind of guy. So like the rain brings me a kind of joy. I'm like, oh, it's raining, unless I have to walk in it. God forbid. But then I'm like a cat. I'm like a cat in the bath. Like, meow. Food. Food. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten yet today. It's not healthy. I'm going too soon. Having just a balanced diet, like everything that they say you're supposed to eat, there's a reason for it. Some of it you have to eat in small doses. Stuff like selenium in Brazil nuts, walnuts, almonds are really really good for building testosterone, and they're really good for balancing your hormones and for an energy boost, for a brain boost. They're just really, really healthy. But one reason not to eat too many Brazil nuts in a day is because you can build up a selenium toxicity. So there's a good and bad here. It helps to grow your own, but when it comes to Brazil nuts, they pull that up from the roots, which is a service that they provide permaculturally, but it's not so great for humans culinarily. Carbohydrates are essential for brain function, especially fruits and vegetables and beans, which are also good for your heart. As we've already covered, heart function, brain function work very well together. Um, Also, the giggling that I did in between these two takes is good for oxytocin and serotonin. So hooray. Um, you need carbohydrates for brain function. It's better to have them be natural, plant based carbohydrates and less refined sugars in cakes and processed sweets, which I'm definitely addicted to. I'm just as bad as anyone else. Um, I don't think I've gone a day without cake for a while, and I don't intend to stop. The chocolate, dark chocolate especially, is really good for oxytocin. It has just an overall boost when it comes to mostly oxytocin, but also serotonin, and it can lower cortisol a little bit in the process, and dopamine. And Endorphins? Question mark. I mean, no, dark chocolate. When you get that little feel good thing, that's not nothing. That's a whole. You, that's the Homer Simpson with the dilated pupils. That's the whole effect right there. I mean, if you're having a bad minute and you need to just get your shit together, in addition to the slow breathing, the short inhale and long exhale, a bite of like one bite dark chocolate. Yeah. If you're dieting, if you're worried about it, I promise you that one bite of chocolate ain't gonna hurt your diet. But whatever you do, the meltdown you would have if you didn't eat that is you could lose your job. You could, I don't know. There's big consequences. Splits families apart. So uh, eat that dark chocolate. Yeah, have that bag of nuts handy. Carrots are really good. Kiwis are really really good. I'm surprised by how good kiwis turned out to be while I'm doing the research on this. They came up a lot. So yeah, all the usual suspects when it comes to healthy foods. Um, all of them are in play. When it comes to ADHD, because of the iron, you're gonna want maybe a little more red meat and spinach than the average person, but you still gotta watch out because you want a healthy heart so that you don't put yourself in a panic due to hypertension. You don't like have a hypercharged polyvagus system compounding your hypertension, which is all stress based, and CPTSD compounding the whole thing and then compounding the whole thing. It's the wrong kind of compound interest. We'll get into that next week. But the point is, uh, exercise and red meat together are better for the ADHD person. Vegetables are really great for everybody. Um, that kind of includes potatoes, but when it comes to potatoes, you really want to do like yams and sweet potatoes. Not my favorite, but I'm trying. I encourage people to try new foods because you never know what your favorite food's going to be until someone cooks it right. You could put 300 to 1,000 untreated heavenly blue morning glory seeds into a blender and mix it with some applesauce and eat it really fast and stay isolated from anyone but a babysitter in a forest. There's all kinds of ways to eat and stay healthy. It's good to have healthy bowel movements. Serotonin is not just in the brain, it's in the gut. Whenever you're feeling anxious and you have a stomach problem, it's a serotonin thing. So it might mean that you need a boost, uh, which there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of ways to do it naturally. So a lot of those can work. And the 4 in, eight hold, 8 exhale is a good way to do it. Um, if you don't have other methods handy, you can always breathe a little. Or, I mean, if you don't have time to breathe, then you should probably be fighting or fleeing. Um, for real, it might mean uh, you have to do that. There's also fawn, uh, which can be a couple different things. Fawning as a defense mechanism can be things like uh, worshiping people in authority, or praising people of authority, or like a celebrity, the simping for a celebrity of any kind. Could be a form of fawning. It could be, yes, boss, no, boss, I'm just following orders. Um, as a coping mechanism for trauma, to fawn, it can be, fucking. Fawning leads to fucking. It could be um, a submissive response. You know, I'll do whatever you say, just don't hurt me. Um, which is kind of what the police tell you to do if you're getting mugged. They don't tell you to fight back because they'll arrest you. Self defense will get you 25 to life if you don't. You have to fight really, really hard, and it's expensive and time consuming and traumatizing when you have to deal with the self defense case. It's a harrowing experience. So they will punish you if you defend yourself. The government, the law, if you defend yourself. Uh, they have to have really been threatening you, and your amount of force has to be less than or equal to, and that's perception, and the perception will be equal to is already less than. See, you have to do exactly that force to get them to scurry away. You have to prove that in a court. Be ready to prove that in court. I feel like I'm off track. I'm on track. Trauma is scary, and sometimes you get into a situation that you can't escape from. And sometimes it's simple things, and sometimes they're really terrifying things. And sometimes, um, yeah. So it's better. It's a trauma response to. It's a coping mechanism to fawn and to freeze, and freezing like play dead sometimes, which doesn't always work. And ignoring can be a kind of freezing. It freeze someone out metaphorically, but yeah, uh, all trauma responses, and that's why mindfulness is so important. You have to know, as part of understanding how you're going to react to stuff. Because I've gone through all of it. I've fucked in self defense, which is scary. That is one of the worst moments of my life, and I've fawned to keep a job, and I froze when I really wish I had acted, and I've had trauma from freezing, and regret, the shame, the self critic, and the shame when I could have acted and I didn't. Um, these are all things to keep in mind as we go along. These are how we cope with the world, and the world is. See, I always think of it as the world. I still see it that way. The world is where I have to be on the defense because the world is always attacking. I can't see it as a friendly place, and that's part of what we're trying to work through in this therapy session today. Class, do you have any questions? That's what Dr. Pete Walker would call an emotional flashback. That's where your polyvagal system is having a trauma flashback, but not your brain. There's no visual component, there's no auditory component. You're just suddenly back into this place where you're a small child and feeling helpless. And so I took some steps. I had to take a break. I drank water. Uh, the snack probably won't affect me for at least 15 minutes, but it's in there. And I smoked a little bit, and I had my breathing exercises, and I'm back on track, and that's leading by example um, in my small way. So now I can feel some sort of pride in having followed the steps and demonstrated them by telling you about it. Alrighty, where were we? Mirror neurons. Mirror neurons. When you look at someone's face and they show you a sad face, you're going to react to it. You're going to react to it in certain ways. Uh, in a healthy mind, you'll react to sadness by with sadness, happiness with happiness. Uh, there's reasons a healthy person might not react those ways. Uh, you might see someone react to sadness with anger. That is a hurt person. It's hard to feel empathetic to someone reacting to sadness with anger, but they are indeed a hurt person. Pete Walker talks about the look. You could just get a look of disapproval. A lot of people have seen that look. They know it. You see that look. Um, it's almost like an attack. It's something that we maybe developed before we were born. We can recognize that look because it's almost like a attacking jaguar or something. Um, I've given that look a lot. Sometimes when I'm just deep in thought, I have like resting that look face. It's like, it's resting asshole face, but you know, like it's worse. But I'm just like I might be thinking about how much I love puppies. I don't know. I might be thinking about puppies and chocolate chip cookies, and I'm just thinking about it really hard. I was just like, I like, but I just like my facial expression hasn't changed, so I'm not aware of it. Um, but yeah, so mirror neurons, and this can be something you can literally practice facial expressions in the mirror and feel those things. Uh, it's pretty cool. It's better. It's like when other people yawn and you yawn too, or sneezing. Different things like that seem to happen. People do with them in clusters, and that has to do with mirror neurons. So we talked about in that previous episode about humans evolved to be social creatures. We've developed everything we do is a society where we socialize. You know, as a community, we're all part of things together. You know, you don't want to be the person who, if you took that person out, that doesn't even matter. That makes a person that would make me sad. I don't want to be like that. I want to be part of things and matter somehow. So um, that's what we all strive for. It's part of having a sense of purpose in our lives. Self-help books tend to come in sets. They specific flavors of self-help book. My favorite are the neuroscience. It's backed up with research, uh, especially if it ties into previous research and previous theories. It's like this part was valid, even though we don't agree with such and such and such. The research shows that this part specifically is 100% right or 80% right. It's good enough. It's good enough. Um, and really, that's an important part of mental health is their perfection is the enemy of the good. You don't want to be compulsive. That's a sign of an aggravated. Uh, that's a sign of an aggravated polyvagal theory, polyvagal theory, polyvagus nerve. But yeah, you'll see books that draw on behaviorism or, uh, in ugly cases, perhaps eugenics. You'll see a lot of books that are based on faith, based on religion, um, Buddhism included, and mindfulness can feel like that, but it is a functional thing. And what you're focused on is you, you can do things like look around the room and look for everything that's a specific color, like every red object in a room or every blue object. It could be your favorite color or it could be a color that really bothers you, but then you can kind of use humor to be like, oh, wow, like I'm being surrounded by yellow. Uh, you got to be careful not to actually be like, oh no, I'm surrounded by yellow, because it can go both ways. But if you can kind of giggle about it, be like, the yellow is upon us. Um, Little phrases like that, and they can be mantras. My favorite mantra, of course, is I must not fear. Fear's the mind killer. Fear's the little death that brings total obliteration. I must face my fear. I must permit it to pass over me and through me. When I turn my inner eye to see its path, there will be nothing, only I remain. I must not fear. Fear's the mind killer. Fear's the little death that brings total obliteration. I must face my fear. I must permit it to pass over me and through me. Fear's a little death that brings total obliteration. I was faced with fear. I was permitted to pass over me and through me. When I turn in a right to see his path, there will be nothing. Only I remain. I used to say that walking through the desert at night. If you say it loud enough, it's really the loud that'll scare the animals away. Not even like it makes it true. Um, there's a lot of books in the bucket that have to do with attachment theory. Attachment theory is super important to consider. I also like to think of the five love languages, and I kind of get them all mixed up. Um, but yeah, so Attachment Theory by John Bowlby. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. But he had kind of a funky childhood, and he grew up to be a psychologist, and he put all that into how do children form attachments, and a lot of that was confirmed by neuroscience in the neuroscience of human relationships. It covers some of that, but really goes into the neuroscience more than um, anything older. Uh, but I mean, covers a lot of ground. Covers evolutionary psychology, covers biology, covers the neuroscience, as I mentioned, the meditation, autism. A lot of that is just the basal forebrain system malfunctioning due to trauma as a trauma response. And some of this is genetic, and not just genetic in the sense that your parents can pass it down to you, which is also true. It can be epigenetic. You can have genes that get triggered and they're just always on now because you experienced some kind of trauma. And some of the genes can even be trauma specific. Like if it's an environmental trauma, then you're gonna have a different experience than if it was physical abuse. And emotional abuse can have other repercussions, like it'll have the same overlap with physical abuse and even environmental trauma, but there's other echoes. There's other echoes that persist. So um, it all matters. It's all one system connected, and it'll just change. It'll change flavors. Pharmaceutical companies like to take advantage of that by treating symptoms, because the symptoms can be a little different, but the system of the brain though it's one system that's being affected just by being it's just different now. It's like you were one way, but now you've experienced some kind of trauma or severe emotional event because it can be grief. You know, you're not necessarily traumatized when a loved one dies, um, but the grief can overwhelm and make things and make life difficult, and trigger the same. It triggers the same parts of the brain. It triggers the polyvagal theory into fight or flight. I know that I definitely feel a sense of urgency about life that I didn't have before. Um, there's uh, feelings of lust, like a biological urge to have children, feelings of anger and resentment, and feelings of I lost my train of thought. I'm gonna rewind. Yeah, so um, the urgency is what I really want to talk about today. Is um, life is short and precious, and you're here whether you believe it in the sense of existentialism or stoicism, Buddhism. Well, maybe not so much Buddhism, but definitely Christianity. Definitely, um, if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew, you're going to feel like you're here for some kind of purpose, um, and you are. You're not here for nothing, and no, you're not here just to take up space and then rot when you're dead. You're here to you have more. You have value. I'm not here to speak on what that value is. I don't know you as a person, but you, the listener, you have value here as a person. You have value. You have arrived here on this earth by whatever means you. If you call it divine intervention, call it evolution. You're here now. You know, and statistically, that's a big deal. There's so many stars and so many planets around each and every one of those stars, and there's so many galaxies, and there's just this when I say astronomical, the odds of a human being at all being born anywhere is incredible. And then the circumstances, traumatic circumstances, happy circumstances, they shape you. This world where you live, it shapes you. You are part of it now, and you're here, and it's a miracle in a special way. It's not. It doesn't have to be about God. It's a miracle. It's a numbers thing. It's a math thing. If you look at how crazy it is that you are you and your circumstances, and like just think about pick any event in your life, and just hold on a second there and be like, what are the chances that it would happen that way again? And sometimes these can be self fulfilling prophecies. If you don't take care of small things, they can reverberate throughout your life and compound and become worse. You know, you didn't form that proper attachment with your parents, and then, like me, got jealous of your sister, and then you spent your whole life competing with them. And life is so very precious. And there's such a wide variety of there's such a wide variety of choices when it comes to therapy. I really like The Body Keeps Score. It talks about how these things can accumulate. I really like CPTSD from Surviving to Thriving. It is basically a manual for how to cope with it and talks about the trauma parts in more deep, different way, in a slightly different way than Body Keep Score. They work really well together. Um, the neuroscience of human relationships was groundbreaking. And this is really about self care. There's a book, The Neuroscience of Self Care, and that's a really good one as well. And so, so with all that in mind, we'll run through some treatment options. We've talked about talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, psychoanalysis, um, motivational therapy, I guess, would be part of it. We've talked about hypnotherapy, and it does work. You could check out Milton Erickson. He's got some interesting style to him. Uh, Communication is really important. I recommend Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Homecoming. I forget the author's name off the top of my head, but Homecoming is really good. Uh, Carl Rogers' Active Listening is really important. And it's a short one. The audiobook was only 30 minutes long. And it's all you need. Like it's great. It's, he puts about 3 hours worth of information into that 30 minutes. It's so worth it. And it's especially one for me. I need to read that like weekly. Um, the Myth of Sisyphus is probably the most important book to this discussion. So one of the methods that caught my attention from Body Keep Score was neurofeedback. I first heard about it from one of my uncles. He's he's a neuroscientist, so he recommended some places for therapy because I didn't want to do talk therapy, but I didn't understand what neurofeedback was, and I put it off for like a year, and then because I was anxious. And then I read Body Keep Score, and they explained the process. He explains the process in real in good detail, and um, I really appreciated that. So then I made a lot of calls, and a bunch of places wouldn't take me, and it took a second. It took a bit for my insurance to say yes to it, but insurance will cover it. Like Medi-Cal covers it, so most insurance will cover it, and it's a good deal for that. It's hard to find a practitioner who can do it. Um, it's easy to become a practitioner. I don't mean easy, but like simple. If you have a bachelor's degree, then any bachelor's degree, any bachelor's degree, then it helps to have it be in a related field. Um, yeah, so then there's a program to learn the technique because then it's assumed you're already a psychologist, and then you learn the technique to be better at to do this. And what I love about this is that you barely have to talk. And for me, like when I first started, I couldn't, I was so frazzled, I couldn't even communicate trauma. And I had in the past, like I'd been in talk therapy for 20 years. So part of my trauma was talking about the trauma and never, like for 20 years, they're like, oh, this stuff takes time. It's like, okay, but like, come on now, I'm getting old. Like, I don't want to do this my whole life. And they're like, we do. Like, $200 an hour, you bet your ass we do. Um, so I got fed up with talk therapy, and I'm trying neurofeedback, and I'm feeling physical, like, so here's the process of neurofeedback. Here's what happens. They're going to wire something to your brain. My therapist, she wires stuff to my brain. And it's an EEG, an electroencephalophagus. Encephalophagus. uh, gram, encephalogram. I can't say it, but I know what EEG. I get it. So the brain makes noises if you're in a completely silent chamber. Um, and this can cause panic, but for people with PTSD, this can be like an ultimate source of relief. Being in a quiet room for like an hour a week, an hour a day, depending on how stressed out you are. Um, sensory deprivation tanks, same kind of deal. There's sensory deprivation styles where you can cover your ears and eyes and then kind of let yourself dream while conscious. But anyways, so the wires don't do any of that. Um, they hear if you're in a quiet room like that, you can hear your heartbeat, you can hear your thoughts buzzing, and you can hear like the blood rushing through your ears. You can hear all these things. And this is not something I've experienced personally, but I think about it a lot because like sometimes that sounds like the coolest thing ever. And so I've been in really quiet situations where I can get close to that, but it's not like a quiet room, you know, like just out in the desert when there's not bikers around and warplanes overhead practicing war maneuvers. Um, then it can, for those quiet moments, it can be really pleasant. Definitely want to live elsewhere instead, um, in the long run. I lost my train of thought again. Okay, so they put the encephalophagus on your esophagus. No, there's all this stuff in your cranium, and there's specific points in your brain, and they correspond with different, with the sections as discussed earlier, and it's not putting into your brain. It's hearing the EEG is hearing what's going on in your brain. That information is being fed into software. The software is being fed back into a TV. Now on the TV, a lot of people are watching programs. They're watching TV shows. That's not what I do, but I'll get to that in a moment. A lot of people will be watching TV. It helps to do something pleasant. I've read in Reddit and such, they'll talk about David Attenborough documentaries. That sounds like a nice one. When I did it, the first time I did it, I tried Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest worked out pretty well. Some comedies didn't work out well. I found myself strangely triggered by Rugrats and by Archer. Archer, I love. I still love Archer, but I couldn't do it for. I couldn't do it a year ago for neurofeedback. Um, then, but yeah, so I would recommend that any nature documentary. I would recommend. They have some that are just like peaceful scenery kind of things. There's a version called Synchrony where they put headphones on and then you're listening to things and watching a piece. It's kind of like it's neurofeedback but backwards. The stimulus is coming through your ears and then the picture is stationary. In but I would recommend for TV shows you could do Doug is really good. You could do Parks and Rec or The Good Place. You might want to try Better Things. Pamela Adlon's show is really, really good. It's a high quality show. It might be triggering for neurofeedback, but it depends on the person. It's a really sweet show for the most part, but it also tackles uh, human events, and it's mostly comedy, but there's a lot of drama and just heartfelt family moments. So not necessarily comedy or drama, but maybe emotionally charged in a deeper sense. I love Better Things. We'll just go there and say that. Uh, yeah, I haven't seen Ted Lasso, but I imagine Ted Lasso would be among them. Possibly Glee. Um, whatever whatever makes you you know it's different for different people. It helps if it's not so stimulating. So that's why the nature documentaries are a little bit better, because then there's periods of calm and quiet. Um, and it could be church sermons. Again, at no part in this process is religion and psychology mutually exclusive. If you need that to get better, don't neglect the science. You can watch your favorite sermon during neurofeedback. You can watch. It depends on the practitioner. I had one practitioner where you could. She had a book, and you could select from the book. And I had one practitioner. Uh, well, my current practitioner can just. I could see. I could say like I want to watch this show, and she's got a subscription for that. So you know, we're just it's just right through Netflix. For the most part, pretty much just Netflix for me. Um, but you get the idea. Um, so my favorite thing to do now for the last year, and I really couldn't do TV at all. TV kind of agitated me regardless. Um, so I do the games. I love the games. They're so simple and silly and cute, and they just bring so much joy to my heart and to my neuroreceptors. It's so complicated. It's so like the game will become more challenging if your reward center is going haywire. It'll tone you down and make you get frustrated. Even though it's a simple game, it'll the things will change to make it harder. That the character will shrink and expand based on your neural activity. That it's being measured through the EEG, and then the TV is responding. This is true for the TV shows too. It'll gray out, it'll shrink, it'll get wider, it'll get louder or quieter. The games are so much more involved. There's so much more simulation going on. There's like the frequency of monsters appearing, or like um, just the overall challenging nature of things changes based. Like if you need to focus more, if your reward centers are acting up, everything, and it there's a baseline. We have a scientific, we know now, like there's an expected range, and then your personality isn't changing. Uh, right. So, anyways, so your personality isn't changing. Um, it's a lot like transcendental meditation. There's a lot of overlap between what happens during a neurofeedback session and what happens to your brain during transcendental meditation. Um, and really, again, any meditation, you're bringing normal for each person is a little different, and so you can be your own quirky little self and still have psychological balance and hormonal balance, which again can be different for different people in different circumstances, Maybe you want a little spike of serotonin, or maybe you need, maybe it's just time for that. Um, and there's, you can work in a reward in your daily habits. Um, for me, it's not even so much a reward as just at some point in the day, I need some chocolate. I just need some chocolate because I have serotonin issues. Um, Serotonin issues can come about in a lot of different ways. One I really would strongly warn against. There's different kinds of therapy, and um, one that's coming up on the market is MDMA, ecstasy, ketamine. Now we'll get to the one I like, but MDMA, even with the sitter, you're playing with your serotonin levels. One of the biggest downsides to MDMA is that you can have a major you do have a major serotonin crash the next day, and from thence forward you're having trouble producing serotonin on your own. And then ketamine, um, it's even harder to be a practitioner of ketamine. It's easy to overdo it, especially if you're used to being around people who do it a lot. And you're that kind of practitioner, and then you end up with the newbie, and you're not as gentle as you were planning to be, and then you end up in a K-hole, and that's just like a big old dopamine and serotonin dip, and you're just perseverating. You're just trapped in a fight or flight in your own head, and you can't really look outwards like you're supposed to. Like, it's just a lot harder to pay attention to the outside world. It's easy to have an amygdala hijacking when that happens. So, so for trauma, um, another one that's talked about in Body Keeps Score is EMDR, eye movement desensitization R. It's up on the screen. Um, Basically, they move the fingers around. The practitioner, it's a mental health professional. They presumably have a degree and um, and then special training. They move fingers over your eyes, and they have you think of, like, hyper focus on a specific event, like a specific trauma. This is something, like, especially for firefighters or for police officers. Um, it's the kind of thing that works well for, there's a specific traumatic event that's fucking you up. War, soldiers. Um, it's true for just regular people who got their ass beat real bad one time, experience, witness a bad car accident or something. Um, it's if you have, like I still am not ready for it. It's one of the things that me and my therapist agree upon. So I don't think that I could relive a trauma long enough to do 15 minutes of EMDR. And it's not something I would trust to a YouTube video. I would trust hypnosis to specific YouTube videos. Um, while I'm recording this, I've got my relaxing sleep waves, which are just relaxing. I don't believe in the 432 part of it. I don't believe in fancy hertz like that. I mean, the brainwaves part is measured. We've proven that. But 432 is just hearing. It's not really. There's not really any significant difference between that and 440. There's no cosmological difference. And if you would experience a whole lot of things a whole lot different, it wouldn't just be, yeah, it's wrong in all ways. I'm off track now. Where was I? EMDR. Okay, so um, I haven't tried it yet, uh, but maybe one day I will. I do think it works. I think it's worth trying for people who feel ready for it or want a quick therapy kind of thing, and then to like they want to like get over it and get back to their lives. It's one of the if you're one of those people, it's a good therapy for you. I like neurofeedback because I can watch TV and play video games and not talk to anyone, and and kind of be in my own world, and then I can use it as talk therapy if I need to. I can use my therapist as a regular talk therapist if I have too much on my mind. As long as I stay with my eyes on the screen, I can talk about whatever. That's the important part, is having the eyes on the screen. The EMDR is a really good system, and it seems to work for people. It can be it's very hazardous. Like I said, you don't want to use it on a YouTube video because uh, you can cause more damage if it's not for you, or if they're just like, if they didn't take it seriously when they made the video. Um, you want to get pre-screened by someone whose job is to pre-screen you. You want it. They On the one hand, yeah, they're getting paid to do it. But on the other hand, the insurance is covering it, and they know what they're doing. And if you really you want to be careful with stuff like EMDR. It's it seems silly. It's just moving your fingers in front of your face, but let me tell you, I'm not ready for it. One interesting way that people sometimes cope with trauma is through bondage, dominance, sadomasochism. There's other there's other ways to interpret B, D, S, and M. Uh, but yeah, so those systems, those internal family systems can be externalized, and those external family traumas can be internalized. And at some point in the process, um, you can either practice healthy parenting or re- relive your darkest moments with a person who maybe doesn't deserve that. But the ideal way of doing it, there are a lot of psychological benefits to the practice. Um, it's sort of the end result of living your life, and if every moment of every day is dealing with uh, self discipline, there's a part of you that either overly fetishizes that into a dominance role, or in the need to escape that daily ritual into a submissive role. And uh, either way, it's healthy. It's surprisingly healthy. You know you're close to having your shit together if you can even approach that lifestyle with appropriately. And a good resource to start with would be Anton Fullman. That's the author's name. He's got a couple different books, Heart of Dominance and, well, okay, Heart of Dominance is where you need to start anyways. So uh, that's a fun little spicy way. We're wrapping things up for this episode. I just wanted to get that get get those jabs in while we can. Uh, a bit of levity because uh, life is so damn tragic. So we'll end it here, kind of coming back full circle if you're taking responsibility for your own personal mind and personal psychology, um, you've done a lot of homework and maybe you're having trouble processing the final bits of information. Uh, Ayahuasca, if you can get it, of course, but my preference would be psilocybin mushrooms. It's a pretty exciting time to be alive. In 2019, Oakland decriminalized psilocybin mushrooms. You can just buy like candy bars with magic mushrooms over the counter. And then in San Francisco, there's clinical trials to see the health benefits, testing for stuff like anorexia, stuff dealing with trauma, all kinds of stuff. Um, so it's a pretty exciting time to be in therapy. It's a lot better than the old days when they just threw you in prison. Still very much a part of things. Just an alert to everyone in the world that um, a huge portion of the privatized prisons for profit, full of mental health individuals, homeless people on the street in desperate need of our help, uh, mental health patients who can't get treatment because it's all about the money and not about the community. And if you already have the money and you think that this is worth fixing, I encourage you to put your money, because you could get it back with insurance. This could still be a business. It could be a nonprofit. You can make bank off of it in your own special way and still do the right thing. It's so important to do the right thing once in a while. The last thing I ever said to my sister was no. Just no. That's it. She sent me a text message asking if I wanted to go somewhere far away to be in nature. And what I wanted to say was no, come to my house. Come visit me in the desert. See how weird I am. Um, try it my way. You know, why go anywhere else? You can stay at my house as long as you want. But instead, I was at this dude's house. I would say he's my friend, but we're not friends. Music was blasting. I was having a conversation with him, joint in one hand, beer in the other, food on the counter that I was supposed to be eating, and every so often his wife would interrupt, "Why aren't you eating? Eat, eat, eat." So I was focused on all the stimulation, and I wasn't expecting a call, and I thought I had more time. And I kept wanting to send the next part of the message, say the elaborations. I just kind of forgot about it that day. Just kind of got away from me after that. I thought I had more time. You don't always know how much time you have. You need to live in the here and now and, and cherish every minute you have. It bothers the fuck out of me when people talk about suicide being the easy way out. It bothers the fuck out of me. It's like the ugliest shit. Ain't nothing easy about any of this. remember the fourth time that I got 5115. I was trying to kill myself. And my sister had already passed. I'm just like having an amygdala hijack, crazy with grief. I had a dog at the time, so I took my dog for a walk. And I listened to music. I tried to find some music that would inspire me. I walked for a long time. And before I got back to the house, there were police officers looking for me. And I freaked out all over again because I didn't want to go back to jail. I didn't want to get 5150 again, which is what ended up happening. So I tried to kill myself by slamming my head on the pavement as hard as I fucking could. And there's this woman, she's a mental health professional. And mental health professional. Her name was Eileen Colorado. That's her real name. Feel free to look her up and do whatever comes to mind. I have no fucks regarding this person. She stood over me. She stood over me in one of my darkest moments in my entire life. She somehow had read my file and was all up in my business about my second 5150. Not here, not now. Miss Eileen Colorado stood over me with her arms crossed. Looking down at me. I'm actively trying to die. I'm slamming my head. I'm actively trying to die. It's like I just want to get away. It's like I just want the pain to stop. She's leaning over me like this. She's got her Karen voice, like, let me talk to the manager. She's all like, suicide is illegal. Suicide is illegal. Suicide is illegal. It's what? Bitch said what? It's illegal? What are you gonna do? Arrest my ghost? What are you gonna do? Dig my fucking sister up, bitch? You gonna dig my fucking sister up? That's the look. That's the look. Go look at chapter 8 if you ever have an emotional flashback because someone did this to you. I don't think my sister committed suicide. I think she performed harakiri. My sister was a fucking warrior. My sister fucking kicked my ass more times than I can count. I never want to fight against her. My sister was listening to punk rock before me. She's 2 years younger. She was fighting her whole life. If she wants to fucking quit, she can quit anytime she wants. And the rest of us need to hold on tight to the myth of Sisyphus. Every morning, the rock is at the bottom of the hill. And every day, we gotta push it to the top. Arms outstretched, hands pressed against pressed against the stone. As Camus says, for the face is pressed against the stone is as hard as the stone itself.
Oh, now they come knocking on my sister's door, saying, "Come on, sister, ain't you ready to go?" And my sister stooped down, pulled up her shoes, and she moved on down by that Jordan Street, and then she shouted, "Take another hit and bury up."
As a sort of bonus content, I'll share a bit of my family with you. These are some quotes. I'm not related to Jonathan Safran Foer. It's just everyone in my family, or everyone on my mom's side of the family, has read this book. Whether not everyone liked it, but we've all read it. So, in keeping with the myth of Sisyphus, he awoke each morning with the desire to do right, to be a good and meaningful person, to be, as simple as it sounded and as impossible as it actually was, happy. And during the course of each day, his heart would descend from his chest into his stomach. By early afternoon, he was overcome by the feeling that nothing was right, or nothing was right for him, and by the desire to be alone. By evening, he was fulfilled, alone in the magnitude of his grief, alone in his aimless guilt, alone even in his loneliness. "I am not sad," he would repeat to himself over and over. "I am not sad." As if he might one day convince himself, or fool himself, or convince others. The only thing worse than being sad is for others to know that you are sad. I am not sad. I am not sad. Because his life had unlimited potential for happiness, insofar as it was an empty white room. He would fall asleep with his heart at the foot of his bed, like some domesticated animal that was no part of him at all. And each morning he would wake with it again in the cupboard of his rib cage, having become a little heavier, a little weaker, but still pumping. And by the mid-afternoon he was again overcome with the desire to be somewhere else, someone else, someone else, somewhere else. I am not sad. different excerpt. She was a genius of sadness. Immersing herself in it, separating its numerous strands, appreciating its subtle nuances. She was a prism through which sadness could be divided into its infinite spectrum. One day you will do things for me that you hate. That is what it means to be family. This is love, she thought, isn't it? When you notice someone's absence and hate that absence more than anything, more even than you love their presence. The more you love someone, he came to think, the harder it is to tell them. It surprised him that strangers didn't stop each other on the street to say, I love you. I don't think there are any limits to how excellent we could make life seem.